Hello and welcome to the Depressing World podcast, episode 6, maybe? I don't know what the episode number is. It's episode number something. And today we are going to be covering various topics. The one I'll probably talk about the most, though, is going to be artificial intelligence. So if that interests you, then be sure to stick around for episode whatever of the Depressing World podcast. Okay, so one thing that I consistently see that really does actually quite piss me off is I see people on the internet who's like, oh, if only we'd been born like 40, 50 years ago, then we would have been like, I don't know, like around to watch space travel. Nothing cool's going to happen in our lifetime, etc., etc. And this is usually a thing that I see with people who are around about my age or slightly older. So like they'll be anywhere between the age of 16 to like, I'd say early 30s. Because they didn't get to see the invention of the computer fully. They just kind of got the computer and they acted like it was something that had always existed. But the thing is that if you're around about the age of 30, you're almost guaranteed to live through an event that has the nickname the technological singularity. I believe the reason that it's called that is because there's some science fiction writer, apologies. And essentially what it is it's when we are capable of, or at least we have the capability to design AIs that are smarter than us, which is a pretty big deal. Because now, I mean, you've got Siri and crap like that now, and they're more like personal assistants than actual AIs. But even if you did consider them to be AIs, because I mean they are kind of artificial intelligence, it's not. It's in its most rudimentary form. When we talk about like actual technological singularity, we're talking about something that is not only good, it's better than us, and it would perhaps be capable of designing upgrades to itself and making it so that it can build an even better version of itself. And you generally get the gist that if that entire trend continues and it can continue to develop better and better and better and better versions of itself, then there would be a massive explosion of information. Because if you have some AI which is essentially, for all intents and purposes, a human being, it probably wouldn't have a conscience, because we probably wouldn't want it to have one, because if it did, it would probably end up killing us all, or at least we want to try and, do it in a safe way. I know that Elon Musk is a company that's dedicated to making AI safe, and all of that fun stuff, but let's just say if you could measure the IQ of this, and I know that IQ isn't a perfect measurement for intelligence, I believe what it is a measurement for, it's a measurement for, it gives you a vague idea of how quickly somebody is capable of learning something. So if you've got a really high IQ, then it means that you can learn stuff fairly quickly, and that's generally a decent indicator of intelligence, because if you can learn stuff quickly, then you're probably quite an intelligent person, because you picked up a lot along the way, and you can recall it all, and you know how to do stuff, and also you can be taught to do stuff quickly. So, if there was an explosion of information... Sorry, we're talking about IQ, I got derailed then. So basically, let's just say that, I don't know, somebody who we would classify as a super genius, or just a genius, probably has an IQ of somewhere over 160, because I think that's a good number, because I believe that's around about the intelligence of somebody like Einstein. Again, it doesn't mean that they're actually going to be intelligent, it just means that they have the capability to be intelligent. Not to say that anybody else doesn't, because again, IQ is not a perfect indicator, it's just one of the best indicators that we have. And so therefore, it's what I'm using as a way to kind of gauge basic intelligence and how useful this how useful this AI would be. So let's say that like an incredibly intelligent person is 160. Let's say that when we first design an AI that is smarter than us, it has an IQ of 170, but then a year later it designs its own AI that has an IQ of 180, and then that one designs with an IQ of 200. You get the point. And I'm using IQ again in a sense that it measures that it's like a direct correlation between intelligence, which in real life it isn't, but you get my drift. Basically, it designs better and better versions of itself that are more capable of problem solving, more capable of everything, which would, of course, cause an explosion of information, because when it gets to a certain level, it will be so much better than us that it can do one of them can and it's not like we can just build one computer. We could build a network of these things that could communicate with each other and share information and share research, and you could easily link them together to have a vast network of incredibly intelligent things that in a few days or in like a year can do the research that it would take an entire human team decades to do. Like you could have like an AI that's capable in 1 year of doing what it would take a human team of 10, 50. So it should hopefully be something that's fairly significant that happens, and in all likelihood it will happen in our lifetime, because if you've seen things, you can go and look at transistor count charts. I think the biggest chip last year had 10 billion transistors. I don't remember the size. I don't think that the size was released, but it had 10 billion transistors. I believe I'm right when I say billion. And I think a Ryzen 7 CPU has about 7 billion transistors, something like that, which is an insane amount for a commercial CPU. But the biggest one last year had 10 billion. And this year, with AMD releasing EPYC, which is their new server-grade hardware, which, I mean, it's server-grade because you can only actually get it if you buy a board off Supermicro, and it has to be assembled for you and all that crap. But basically, AMD's new chip has, I think, 19 billion transistors, and when we compare that to the best Intel one, I believe the best Intel one has about 9 billion or something like that, so the best Intel one not only has double the amount of transistors, but I believe that the best Intel one has got, I think the area is 454 millimeters squared, whereas the best, that's the best Intel one, 454 millimeters squared, I believe. I'm just going off my head, but I did read these articles a few minutes ago. Whereas the best AMD one, I believe it's something like 192. So it has over double the amount of transistors in half the space in a year. If you think about that, that means that, if this current rate was kept up, then in a year or two we would be at 40 billion transistors on something that would be a similar size. Or they could just make the chips bigger. AMD could just make a chip that's, I mean, I don't know if it works exactly like this, because of course you've got to deal with loads of problems such as thermals, and I'm sure there's a whole array of problems that I'm not even vaguely aware of, because I am in no way a computer systems architect or anything like that. I'm not even claiming to be one. But let's just say that they could design a chip that, if they made it bigger, had 30 billion transistors on. Then that's, again, a huge amount of progress, and you get the whole idea. And I believe the goal of this is to get a chip that has the same amount of transistors as there are... Wait, what was it? Wait. Let me just give me a second. I need to quickly just look some stuff up. How many... I don't know if it was the same amount. I think it was the amount of synapses in the human brain, which means that it needs to get to a number of 100 trillion, which of course is a lot of synapses. I mean, sorry, a lot of transistors. But, it's within reason to think that in the next decade we could easily be at 1 trillion. And then the growth's not, I mean, it's Moore's Law. I believe that's what the law is called, because it was made by the guy who founded Intel. And it's basically the idea that, the increase in amount of transistors on a chip is not a constant gain, it's an exponential gain. It's not like it's a slow increase. It's not like you gain 50 million a year or 5 billion a year or anything like that. It's, when they first released computer chips, it was an increase of a few hundred a year or a few thousand a year. Now it's an increase of, it appears to be around about 10 billion a year. So you get the whole point that in 40 years we've gone from increasing 1,000 a year to 10 billion a year. So give it another 40 years, we'll probably be increasing a few trillion a year, at which point we're practically there. So I believe it's predicted to happen by some experts in something like 2045. I've seen an entire variation anywhere between 2030 all the way up to 2050, but generally the consensus is that it's gonna happen in the 21st century, somewhere around the middle of the 21st century. So if you were born anywhere, if you're gonna make it to I don't know, 2070, then, and think about with modern healthcare and all that crap as well. So basically, if I would say that if you're no older than like 20 or 30 now, if you're around about the 30 mark, maybe slightly younger, you're probably almost guaranteed to see this, to at least see a CPU or a processor having more transistors than there are synapses in the human brain. You're not necessarily guaranteed to see an AI that can take advantage of that and an AI that is smarter than us, but you are almost guaranteed to see at least an incredibly powerful computer that just makes our computers look childish, really. Because, I mean, our computers are essentially childish compared to a lot of these things. But, I don't know, it'll just be interesting to see where everything goes. Because it's exciting to see the massive amount of development that's occurred in humanity in the past few hundred years. I mean, it's like, God, to think that we were alive for, like, thousands upon thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution, and then the Industrial Revolution occurred just a few hundred years ago, and since then the amount of the progress we've made has been insane in such a small amount of time. And like I said about the amount of transistors on a CPU, this isn't like constant progress, this is exponential progress. We don't just get slightly better every year, we get even like dramatically better every year. So it's just cool to see, really. I like that. I like how, like, there's not... That's the thing that makes it exciting and makes life exciting, is that you don't know what's next. It could be literally anything, because you can't really predict what's around the corner. I mean, of course, there's a bunch of, political tensions at the moment with crap like North Korea and, but... If you're just trying to forget about politics for a bit, which I know is rather difficult because it seems to be all anybody cares about and all that is ever reported and all that anybody ever goddamn talks about, and it drives me insane because it's like, just look at some of the cool stuff that's around. Just get your head out of politics for 5 minutes if you can survive without reading what Donald Trump's tweeted or reading about some politician that you hate or something like that, and just admire where we are as a species and what we're going to probably end up having and what... But just, oh my god, we're on the cusp of some really awesome stuff. And I mean, it's annoying to a degree because it's like we're probably on the cusp of, or at least we're fairly close to stuff like space travel being fairly common. Like, I mean, I know there's the whole thing where Elon Musk wants a colony on Mars. He doesn't necessarily plan on it happening in his lifetime, but he's setting the plans in motion so that in 100 or 200 years there'll be a colony on Mars that has a few thousand. I think it was 1,000 people. It might have been hundreds of thousands, though. I don't know. I mean, he basically wants a city on Mars. And again, that's just... There's so much cool stuff that we're just on the cusp of seeing and we're unfortunately not going to see. And yes, that does suck. It does suck that we didn't get to see all of this cool stuff that's going to happen. But at the same time, we're going to see some crazy shit happen. Some stuff that there will be people jealous, like... I don't know if people in the future would necessarily... I mean, it'd be like those people who want to go... who wish that they were born, like, 50 years ago so that they could see Apollo 11 and crap like that. There will be people in the future who wish that they were born in the time that you've been born so that they could see the explosion of artificial intelligence, the development of the computer from something that was just a simple box to something that the entire world depends on at this point. Like, they would love to see that transition happening. So, just be glad that you were born when you were, because you are going to see some cool shit. And to pretend that you're not is just, you're just wrong. There's no other way of saying it, because cool shit's going to happen. I hope. I'm making all these promises. Somebody's going to come back here in like 2050 and be like, what a load of bullshit. After the Great Korean War, we only have, 40 billion transistors on a chip now. Or something like that. Or like, AMD will dissolve and go under, and then Intel, being the dicks that they are, just won't develop anything new. And so it'll be years upon years of no development until eventually some poor company manages to finally make their own chips. Actually, I think if AMD did go under, Isn't Apple looking at... I mean, I think Apple does already make its own processors, but I think that they're really looking at getting into that a bit more. I'm not 100% confident they do, but I believe they do. And if not, I believe they were at least looking at getting into it, or if they are, then they're looking at making it better. So I think Apple would probably just take AMD's place if AMD did dissolve. I'm saying AMD is dissolving, as much as this is probably offending a bunch of you. The likelihood of Intel dissolving over AMD is almost minuscule. Like, AMD just has way less money than Intel does. And also, I mean, I think it might be corrected this year. Because last year they lost a bunch of money. I think they lost 500 million in a year. Intel makes money, for those of you wondering. AMD didn't. I think it was in 2015 or 2016, but they lost 500 million in that year. I don't know. I haven't looked at any of their recent earnings reports. I think they are not losing money anymore, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But what was I going to say? I was talking about them making money. I've completely lost my train of thought now. So I was talking about how AMD has like 2 billion in net assets and Intel has like 100 billion. That's all good. Oh my god, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Well, that's annoying, so I'm going to end the podcast here. Because I'm annoyed now. Because that wasn't supposed to happen. Because I was supposed to be able to remember what I was talking about. But I completely forgot, and I'm sidetracked, and now I'm annoyed, and now because I'm annoyed, I'm struggling to think. So, yeah. Hope you enjoyed episode whatever of the Depressing World podcast. I have been your host, Zach. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, go and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, type me a comment saying what you liked and what you want to see in the next episode. And yeah, go and follow me on Twitter if I even have a Twitter account linked on this channel. I didn't even know. I might not. Who the fuck knows? That's the real question of the day. See you guys in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. I would like to thank our sponsor, MeUndies. Just kidding. There is very much no sponsor. There will probably never be a sponsor either. And I kind of just mocked MeUndies by, saying that they'd actually sponsor this piece of garbage. So they're probably never going to now, even if the podcast did somehow get slightly bigger. They still wouldn't sponsor it because they would find this exact moment and be like, the prick fucking mocked us. And then I would just, never, ever get, any sort of sponsorship. Oh, what I was looking at buying the other night was a vintage microphone, which I know sounds crazy to some of you, but I could literally buy a microphone from like the 1960s, and I could have that old radio voice, which I can't decide. I mean, I love it, but I can't decide if everybody else would love it or if everybody else would hate it, and it'll just stop watching because the audio was kind of grainy and it didn't sound great. But it would be so cool to have like an old-timey radio voice. Either that, or I need to get a better microphone that makes my voice sound a bit bassier. Because I don't want to be one of those people who just put so much bass in that it just sounds ridiculous and, like their voice just sounds so deep that it's like shaking the floor. But I do want it to be slightly deeper just so it doesn't sound as washed out, because I think that that's kind of the one issue that I'm noticing with this microphone is that it doesn't capture bass very well. So it's fairly easy for me to listen to the audio back and think, wow, that sounds pretty damn washed out actually now that I listen back to it. And I don't like that. I like the audio to try and sound as good as I can get it to. I know that I'm not the best audio engineer. I'm not even an audio engineer. I'm now a self-described audio engineer. My fucking god. Oh, and also, I'll just give a quick update. I was trying to get a job at McDonald's. I don't know if I'm going to be employed yet. I went in for an interview yesterday on the 10th of August. Turns out the McDonald's I'm interviewing for has the third busiest drive-thru in the entire UK, which was a terrifying thing to be told, because I suddenly thought, well, why am I trying to apply here? You're all going to hate me, because I'm going to be like the person who spills and like a Coke all over the floor as I'm running to give it to a customer, and the entire kitchen will be shut down while somebody goes and gets a mop so nobody slips and dies or something. But I did the interview. I think it went quite well. But at the same time, I don't think I'm going to get the job. The guy, I can't tell if the guy liked me or if the guy was just pretending to like me while talking to me, because the thing is that, as you may be able to tell from the fact that I do a podcast on my own, I like to talk, especially about myself or about things that interest me. And so when you're asking me questions that are literally designed to draw information out of me and get me to talk about myself, and, you know, some of them were like, what would you do in this situation? But most of them were like me as a person to see if I fit the role. And so I will just spend hours talking about myself. Like, my interview was probably about 15, 20 minutes. I don't know how long they're supposed to be, but I know that the guy who went before me was only about 5 minutes. So, yeah. I just really like to talk about myself because, you know, vanity is king. You know, just really gotta... If you don't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love somebody else? Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I know I've said goodbye about 15 times now, but I swear to God I'm actually gonna do it this time. Thank you very much for listening to the Depressing World podcast, episode boop. I'll see you in the next one, and goodbye, ladies and gents. I'm about to kick somebody's ass. Oh, it was whoop. I said kick, for fuck's sake. See you guys in the next one.